the Yamaha R15, a bike that introduced India to the concept of a fully fed motorcycle with racetrack-ready ergonomics, a properly modern Revy 150cc engine, and albeit slightly high for the time, but a totally justifiable price tag. The bike was immediately the weapon of choice for anyone wanting to learn the craft of track riding, and it has even got many upgrades over the years that have made it an even better package. And now, 3 generations later, here we are with the Yamaha R15 V4. But before we get into all about this bike, do subscribe to the Evo India channel, like this video, share this video, and drop your comments below. Share this video and just look at it. The R15 V4 looks gorgeous, doesn't it? It gets a redesigned front fairing that now resembles the R7, and for that Yamaha gets a big thumbs up. The front fairing design is more than just a cosmetic update. It is also now more aerodynamic and it has a lower drag coefficient than earlier. Apart from that, it also offers better wind protection when in full tuck. And the bike, just look at it, it looks much bigger than it was earlier, and this change in size is a lot more apparent if you keep it right next to the R15 V3. In the new fairing is also this new bi-function LED projector headlamp with these new DRLs on either side, and together they do a good job of illuminating the road ahead of you. Take a step back and the design of the bike starts looking familiar again. The rear section of the bike is identical to the R15 V3 and we're not complaining about it. The design is cohesive and it blends well together. Although, the rear seat is still 1 floor high, so your date won't be particularly happy about that. Now the R15 V4 is available in a few color schemes, namely metallic red, dark night, and this racing blue variant you see here. The racing blue variant costs around Rs 6,000 more than the standard colorways, and for that you also get a quick shifter which is standard on the R15M and the MotoGP editions. Yamaha has decided not to mess with the engine on the R15, meaning it gets the same 155cc single-cylinder liquid-cooled engine that gets VVA. Now in terms of performance, this is not one bike that's going to blow your mind in terms of outright acceleration or power delivery, but at the same time it's an engaging bike to ride. Like I said, the bike also gets VVA, which in turn means that you have a wider power band to play with. What this means is you can carry a gear higher into a corner and still get drive coming out of it, unlike the engines on the R15 V2 and the V1. This is also helped by the fact that the engine now makes its peak torque 1000 RPM earlier than it did on the R15 V3. The engine continues to be mated to a 6-speed gearbox and gets the same slip and assist clutch that ensures a light and easy to operate clutch lever. Oh, and did I also mention that this bike comes with a quick shifter now? So the quick shifter is a standard fitment on this racing blue color scheme, the R15M and the R15 MotoGP edition. But you can also buy it as an accessory for the standard color variants. Now, I wouldn't go as far as calling the quick shifter as a gimmick because it does work. If the engine is in the higher end of the rev range, then your shifts are pretty smooth and the shifts are acceptable. But at the same time, if you're in the lower end of the scale, you're better off shifting with the clutch. Apart from that, in terms of rider aids, this bike also gets a traction control unit. Now this is standard across all variants. There is also a raging debate as to whether a 155cc engine really needs traction control, and honestly it never hindered my riding when I was out riding on the road. But to know that it is there if something were to go wrong is comforting. And I think that's a good thing that Yamaha are doing with this bike. The Yamaha R15 V4 now gets upside down forks. Yes, you heard that correct. It finally gets upside down forks. Now, in theory, an upside down fork setup is bound to be better than a traditional telescopic fork setup. This is purely because the outer tubes, the ones that have more strength, are what are mounted directly on the triple clamp, meaning less flex under load. But that's theory. How does it work in the real world? Well, to put it plain and simple, it works great. Come out here to Carve Canyon Twisties and this is the bike you want to be on. It changes directions extremely well. The suspension is on the stiff side and that's exactly what you want in a road setup like this. But apart from that, you'd be pleasantly surprised with how well this suspension setup even handles bad roads. We are in Pune and the monsoons are just behind us. What this means is we have more potholes than we have roads. And they took everything in their stride. Potholes, bad roads, bumps. Everything. Suspension is stiff, yes, there's no denying that. But at the same time, the damping is great. There were no sudden shocks, sudden jerks, anything that went right up my spine and caused me discomfort. Apart from that, this bike still gets the Delta box frame that we all know and love. And that, in combination with this new fork setup, makes this bike the benchmark to beat in this segment. Another change that Yamaha has made to the bike are on the clip-ons. They have made the clip-ons slightly wider and they are now easier to reach, which means there is less strain when you're on the saddle for a long day. Now, I'm not saying this bike is as comfortable as something like a naked bike, but it's just a touch easier to live with. One thing I would like to mention, however, and I was hoping this came stock with the bike, was tank grips. Now this is a redesigned tank. It's bigger, it's roomier, and even bigger riders like me can comfortably hold on to the tank. But the problem is lack of grippy surface. Means I can't really hold on to the tank for too long without my legs starting to slip off. What this means is there was more pressure on my upper body to ride, and something that could be easily alleviated with tank grips.
Another chink in the R15 V4's armor would be its braking. The front brake seems to have decent initial bite and feedback, but over the course of a few kilometers, you lose quite a bit of your braking performance thanks to brake fade, and the feel at the lever starts to become rather spongy. Even the ABS kicks in a little earlier than I would like.
In terms of features, this R15 V4 gets an all-new instrument cluster which is shaped differently and houses more information than it did on the V3. It also gets a dedicated track mode that showcases lap timings and more. Apart from that, this instrument cluster is also now Bluetooth enabled, which means you can pair your smartphone for notifications and such.
The Yamaha Link app also shows your last parked location and bike health history, which is nice, but the bike does miss out on turn-by-turn navigation, which is something Yamaha could have added.
Now, in terms of pricing, Yamaha with the R15 V4 definitely brings to the table a bunch of worthwhile upgrades. Upgrades like modern styling, upside down forks, a quick shifter and traction control even, all for anywhere between Rs 10 to 15,000 over the R15 V3, depending on which variant of the V4 you buy. So for that, and for all the features you get, I feel it's a fair asking price. And even in terms of rivals, this bike sits in a sweet spot because its closest rival in terms of price is the KTM RC125. Well, that is underpowered and under-equipped, and at the other end of the spectrum you have the KTM RC200, which definitely has more performance. But bear in mind, the ex-showroom price of that bike breaches the 2 lakh mark. So to conclude, the R15 V4 is definitely a step up over its predecessor. It's a worthy upgrade, and it still remains the tool of choice. It still remains the bike you should go for if you want to hone your track riding skills with this amount of performance. But in my opinion, it's high time Yamaha plonked a bigger engine in this chassis because it definitely can take it. What do you feel? Let us know in the comment section down below, and subscribe to the Evo India channel to stay notified on all things thrill of riding and thrill of driving.